Week 5 of the fantasy football season. Here's the top defense DST units. I'm ranking number 1, the Minnesota Vikings. Vikings, good matchup this week versus the Jets. The Jets, their offense hasn't looked good for the majority of the season. Rodgers, he's had a couple flashes here and there, but 40 years old, coming off the Achilles, not that mobile in the pocket, even though he's ran for a couple first downs this season. And we know this Viking team, they knows Aaron Rodgers pretty well. And this season, they're creating a lot of turnovers. They get to the quarterback. And this week in London, I think Minnesota, they create some havoc in this ball game versus Rodgers, get them frustrated once again. And their DST is number 1 this week. Number 2, the Denver Broncos. Denver, their defense is playing great, especially the last 2 weeks. In 2 games, they were underdogs. Going into Tampa, shutting down that offense to 1 touchdown. And then going into New York and holding them out of the end zone, winning a ball game 10-9. So they got the Vegas Raiders this week. Gardner Minshew at quarterback once again. Devontae Adams requesting a trade. He's got a hamstring issue as well. And you got a shutdown corner like Patrick Surtain. It makes everything else easier. And this week, I think they could get a few turnovers in this one is Denver. Get to the quarterback with 12 sacks the last 2 weeks. And I think their defense, that's got to be owned in pretty much all 12, 14-team leagues. Number 3, the Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs now got to rely on their defense even more, where they've been one of the better units all season is this DST. So this week, the Saints coming to town, Arrowhead, Monday night. Now with Rashee Rice out, added to Hollywood Brown and Isaiah Pacheco, this offense is depleted, even though I think we could see them make a deal towards the NFL trade deadline. But this week, New Orleans, first 2 weeks, 91 points in their games, New Orleans. And then the last couple weeks, the offense hasn't done much, and Derek Carr's numbers have fell off. So I think they could get to Carr early and often. Offensive line isn't all that great over there in New Orleans. And when you know Carr, some weeks he's good, few turnovers. And like I said, this Chief team, defense has to play even better now with all those injuries on the offense. Number 4, the San Francisco 49ers this week, a good matchup versus the Arizona Cardinals. Kyler Murray, we know he holds on to the football a lot, inaccurate quarterback at times. And if Murray's not doing work out of the pocket, he's a quarterback. If you can contain him, that's what you want to do. In this 49er team, they went off last week with a monster game. I know it was the New England Patriots, but this week with Arizona coming to town after their defense got embarrassed by the Vikings and the Rams in weeks 2 and 3, this team took pride last week, played good football. And I think this week versus a division rival, which they know very well, I think their defense is a good game once again. Number 5, the Seattle Seahawks. So the Seahawks definitely embarrassed after last week getting the doors blown off, no doubt about it, on Monday Night Football by the Lions, giving up 42 points. But the Giants are coming to town. Daniel Jones hasn't thrown a touchdown all season. We know he's good for a few turnovers, and he's a quarterback that's taken a lot of sacks over the last few seasons. So I think Seattle with the 12th man, and after getting embarrassed, and they want to turn things around this week versus the Giants, where they don't have many weapons besides obviously the impressive rookie Malik Nabers. If they could just limit him a little bit, it'll make everything easier, I believe, for Seattle. And this week, the defense bounces back. Number 6, the Green Bay Packers. So the Packers, a great matchup at the Rams, depleted with no Cooper Kupp, no Puka Nacua. Offensive line isn't all that great. And Matthew Stafford's taken some big hits and sacks this season. And also, we know Matthew Stafford, he's good for a few turnovers as well, where he's the typical gunslinger, going to try to push it down the field. So with young wide receivers, he's playing with and unproven wide receivers, and also a defense that leads the league in turnovers. I think this is going to play right into Green Bay's hand, and they have a good ball game. Number 7, the Chicago Bears. So a few weeks ago, they most likely would have been ranked higher if Bryce Young was starting still for this Panther team. But this Panther team, they're moving the football. Deontay Johnson's looked great over the last 2 weeks for Carolina since Andy Dalton's been in there. Xavier Legette, he's emerged. Chuba Hubbard, 2 games in a row, over 100 yards. But this Chicago defense, they play smash mouth defense. They're going to hit you. They're going to get to the quarterback. And this week, Andy Dalton, we know he's played well, but if you could get a hand on him, he's going down. He's not a mobile quarterback. Also, we know he's a gunslinger as well, where he's going to try to take some risks and make big plays. So I think Chicago, they could play well, hold them to the mid-teens, low 20s, and create some turnovers and havoc. Number 8, the Pittsburgh Steelers. So this Steeler defense last week definitely was a letdown and a plus matchup at the Indianapolis Colts. And even with Flacco coming in, they couldn't get the job done. So this week, Cowboys coming to town. Offensive line has 2 rookies on it for Dallas. They have a non-existent running game for the most part this season. And Dak Prescott, he hasn't been all that great. He's been decent. They're 2-2 on the season, but he hasn't had that patented game. And the Cowboys, they've trailed early and often a lot in the majority of their games this season. So this week, I think this defense could go out there, get pressure on Dak Prescott with TJ Watt. And Fitzpatrick, I don't think he's going to shut down CeeDee Lamb, but he definitely could bother him a little bit and limit the numbers a bit. So like I said, with the Cowboys, only two options in the pass game usually in CeeDee Lamb, Ferguson, and also non-existent running game. And Dak hasn't been playing great football. I think Pittsburgh could bounce back. Number 9, the New England Patriots, good matchup this week. We saw the Dolphins couldn't move the football. Tyler Huntley once again is going to be starting for this Miami Dolphin team. And I know this Patriot defense hasn't been great, but I'm just going off a matchup. And if I see a team that can't move the football in the last 2 weeks like the Dolphins have, even with all those playmakers, Achane, Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, it's not a good thing. And now going into the division rivalry, it could be a defensive battle for the most part. I think New England, as a 1 week streamer option, cracks the top 12. Number 10, the New York Jets. So this week, this Jet defense, they played well last week, no doubt about it. But once again, the offense couldn't get the job done, and Greg Zuerlein missed a field goal to win it. And this week in London, usually those games are high scoring and anything goes. You've seen wacky things over the years happen over there in London. So Minnesota, their offense is one of the more high-powered offenses, believe it or not. Who would have thought coming into the year? But when you got Justin Jefferson, Aaron Jones healthy, he's still a good running back, no doubt about it. And Sam Darnold not turning the football over for the most part. I think it could be a little tough for New York, but also I could see this be a defensive battle between these two teams. So even with all those weapons on offense, I think the New York Jets go out there and still make a few plays on Sam Darnold. Number 11, the Indianapolis Colts. So as a 1 week streaming option, it's a good matchup at the Jaguars, where their offense is one of the worst offenses in the league. Is Jacksonville. Trevor Lawrence, he's taking a lot of big hits, taking sacks, turning the football over. Even though last week they were on the brink of winning that ball game, but just couldn't get the job done at the Houston Texans. But I think Indianapolis, they could create some pressure. We saw last week they sacked Fields a few times, and they played good defense until they stormed down late. It was Pittsburgh trying to make a last-minute run, but obviously didn't win the game. So as a 1 week use, I like the Colts cracking the top 12 in the 12th and final defense DST ranking is the Washington Commanders. So this Commander defense, what a game they played versus a high-powered offense last week, holding Arizona to 14 points. And this week, the only reason they're on here, good matchup versus Cleveland. Deshaun Watson, he's been a crash test dummy behind in the pocket. He's been throwing interceptions, and he's just not scoring points for his team. And Nick Chubb, I know he's been practicing and stuff, but I don't think he's going to play. And if he does play, it's going to be on a limited basis, in my opinion. So with all those factors and not much going on with this Cleveland offense and their offensive line not protecting well, I think Washington back home after 2 road games will get energy from their fans. And I think is a back-end option this week could be productive. So that's a top 12 defense DST units I'm ranking for week 5 of the fantasy football season.